Let's talk to Fleur Hassan-Nahoum. She's the Israeli Foreign Ministry's Special Envoy. She's former Deputy Mayor of Jerusalem and joins us now live from Israel. Very good morning to you, Fleur.
Hi, Julia.
Thank you so much for joining us. I have to say, I was really pleased to be able to meet you on my recent trip to Israel. You spoke to the good people I was travelling with. I could not have believed then that we would be discussing today the prospect that within the next 72 hours, every single one of those families that I met, Hostage Square, and have interviewed over the last couple of years, could possibly be getting their loved ones home. Just tell us your reaction when you saw that this deal was, well, agreed.
Absolutely. So we knew that something was happening when Witkoff and Kushner show up in Egypt and the rest of the government representatives for Israel. And we're just thrilled but cautiously optimistic because ultimately we don't know what's going to happen in the next 48 hours. But at the moment, it looks like these hostages are coming home. There's been an incredible amount of pressure put on Qatar and on Turkey, who are essentially the only people still supporting Hamas. And I think that pressure has worked. But again, Julia, you don't know with these people until the very last minute. Until I see those hostages in that Red Cross van, I'm not going to believe it.
I know, and that's the thing, is that a lot of people are going to feel that way. But see, you see pressure on Qatar and Turkey. There's some reports that, British media, which we know, we've talked many times about the bias in British media on this issue, which seems to argue that, well, Donald Trump had to get involved because Qatar, his big ally, who gave him his big jet, they were angry after the misstep by Netanyahu in those attacks on the Hamas leadership in Qatar. But I would see it the opposite way round, that the Qataris finally realised, this is no longer in our interest to be supporting Hamas, and they put pressure on Hamas because Israel put pressure on them.
Absolutely right, Julia. Ultimately, Qatar have been funding terrorism for years. They fund the poison machine, which is called Al Jazeera. They fund universities to teach hatred. And so ultimately, the chickens came home to roost. For the first time ever, Qatar had a direct consequence of them supporting and being the spokespeople for the Muslim Brotherhood. Let's not forget, the Saudis can't stand Qatar for that reason because it puts their kingdom at risk. The Emiratis, the same thing. They've kicked Al Jazeera out of their countries, and yet the West just lets them in. And so I think I completely agree with your analysis. When Qatar saw that they all of a sudden were in the firing line, that definitely gave them an incentive, and the Americans helped out because Trump is very, very smart. He shows Qatar that now supporting Hamas is a liability.
Yeah, and that's where it was always going to come down to that, wasn't it? It was in the interest of Hamas to keep the hostages and for their paymasters to support that, and they would carry on. And now it appears it's not. Here's the thing, though. There'll be many people who will argue, people who've been critical of Israel's response to the attack on October the 7th, that they believe it's unjustified. They make false claims about genocide. They're provably untrue, categorically untrue, these claims, and that it's a uniquely brutal war and the like. The reality is, though, once Israel no longer has any hostages, lots of those same people will claim Israel has no justification to continue any war effort or any military presence in Gaza. What would you say to that?
Well, that's why there's a 21-point plan that Trump and his people presented and very cleverly got the rest of the Arab world to sign off on it, the Europeans to sign off on it. All these people, all these cheering squad for the two-state solution, they've all signed off on this 21-point plan. And the 21-point plan...
I thought it was 20 now.
Oh, sorry, 20. Well, 21-point plan. But the point is that it gives Israel a perimeter of security between Hamas, between Gaza and Israel, something we never had before. So in some of the map that actually Trump put out on his social media about a week ago, it's very clear that perimeter for us gives us the safety that we need. Look, in an ideal world, Julia, we wouldn't be negotiating with terrorists, but we don't live in an ideal world. This is the cruel, brutal enemy that took our people on October 7th, and we need to get them back. And so, of course, we've had to make compromises. We're having to release 250 murderers from the jails in order to get these hostages. This is not a plan which is good for anyone, but at least it gets them home. I pray it gets them home.
A lot of people have claimed that it is Netanyahu, that your Prime Minister's stubbornness and his urge to stay in power, keeping two particular right-wingers I'd say extremists in his government, that has prevented this sort of deal happening before now. What do you say to that criticism?
This deal was never on the table, Julia, never on the table. They wanted to drip drab the hostages 2 at a time, 3 at a time. We saw what happened in January. 2 one day, 3 one day. We don't know whether they're dead. We don't know whether they're alive. That was the psychological warfare they were doing to us. And Trump came and said, or all or nothing. And if you don't release all the hostages in phase 1, Israel can do whatever they want with America's backing. That type of gun on the table, which is very, very typical of Trump, is what works in the Middle East. You know, this is what works here. You're dealing with people who would take us back to the 7th century if they could with their brutality. What are they going to understand?
Yeah, I mean, this is the thing. The trouble is, people say this peace plan's been agreed and Donald Trump bigs it up and he's doing all the big, I don't believe for a moment that Marco Rubio, the Secretary of State, walking in with a note that they knew would be able to be seen by the cameras, wasn't part of theatrics of this. And he makes the announcement he's going to fly to the Middle East. He wants to be there for it. I don't care. Give the guy 14,000 Nobel Peace Prize. There was a guest of mine said yesterday, give him the prize for physics and astronomy. You give him the prize for everything. But this, I mean, he's done more than most people who've got a lot of those prizes. But here's the thing. The peace plan hasn't been agreed to by Hamas. It's been agreed to by the Arab states, by America, by European nations, and by Israel. But Hamas have said yes, but they've said yes to this phase. This is just phase 1. After that, there is no agreement. And the trouble is that actually the after that bit is rather more complicated.
It is rather more complicated, but that's why there's a 20-point plan with milestones. And so you want this, you have to commit to that. You want that, you have to commit to that. The biggest sticking point is the disarmament, because it's a terrorist group. Their raison d'etre is arms. And that is the biggest sticking point. Are Hamas going to remain governing Gaza? And I hope they don't, mainly for the Palestinian people living in Gaza. They deserve a better leadership than murderous jihadists, people who actually want to give them a future, want to develop an economy. They had that opportunity in 2005, and they elected this terrible government, and this government, of course, never had an election again, and they've taken the people to ruin. And so I hope that this is not just peace for us and quiet for us, but the opportunity for Gazans to have a better future.
Well, we shall see what happens. Fleur Hassan-Nahoum, thank you so much indeed for joining us, Israeli Foreign Ministry's Special Envoy.